Yeah.
Since I arrived in FIFA, that has been my biggest challenge, but at the same time, I'm driven by challenge. So for me, it's a very nice experience and I like it.
Right.
Is that in a way, I supervise the airport operations for all the tournament and all the events that FIFA do. In 1 year, for example, we go to 8 to 10 events, small, not necessarily all of them are big, but we have the best awards, we have the FIFA Congress, we have at least two tournaments under 17 and under 20.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Sporting Global podcast. And today I'm here with Valeria. And Valeria, how are you? How's 2022 treating you so far?
It has been good. Like it looks like already 6 months passed, and not only one, because I have been doing a lot. But it has been treating me very well. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. And it's a pleasure having you part of our podcast, of course. And I think we have a lot of interesting things to talk about today. You know, obviously there's some really cool projects you're working on right now. And then we're going to dive a little bit into your, background, your history, some valuable tips, I think, as well, for all those, students that are like knocking on the door, trying to get their foot in the sport industry, which we all know is a very, challenging and an interesting journey, but it's very passionate driven, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So it's a pleasure having you part of this, as I said. And
thank you. Pleasure is mine.
And it's going to be cool when you're just diving right into it. And I mean, I think we could just start off, just right away off the bat here. We're just tell me a little bit about how your journey in the sport industry began. Just take us through kind of how your background, and how you kind of went into the sport industry.
So my background was in film and film production for my beginning. I'm a journalist, but I have worked for several years with the film industry.
Yeah.
And then, and I live also abroad for a while. And then when I went back to Brazil in 2010, one of my dreams was to be part of the Olympic Games, and part of the production of the Olympic Games. So it was kind of my wish. But before getting there, I worked in the productions of Rock Festival, Rock in Rio. I don't know if you know them. They have an edition in Brazil, in Portugal, and also in Madrid. So I was part of the three of them.
Yeah.
And then I was fortunate enough that in 2013, I was invited to be part of the Rio 2016 organizing committee as the head of arrivals and departures. So that was my foot in the sports journey and the sports life that I am until now.
Awesome. And obviously, right now, you're obviously currently the senior arrivals and departure manager at FIFA. And if you wanted to talk a little about what essentially does this role entail? What are some of the responsibilities you have? And I guess as well, since it's FIFA, there's obviously a lot of tournaments, a lot of things happening. Tell us some of the projects that you're working on right now.
So basically, arrivals and departures, as the name says, we take care about all the arrivals and all the departures, but it's mainly airport operations. So whenever you deal with a big tournament, either Olympic Games or a FIFA World Cup, you have not only a lot of spectators going, but at the same time, you have the athletes, the teams, you have a lot of other media, broadcasters, and several guests. So each one of them have a different service level, and not necessarily the airports are used to get this amount of people arriving at the same time and then departing at the same time. So it's kind of like organizing this whole project into the operations of the airports.
Right.
And then, but the job starts way before it, because, for example, in Brazil with the Rio 2016 Olympics, my father always asked, why do you need to start in 2013 if the Olympics is only 2016?
Right.
Because there needs to be a lot of negotiation. We are dealing here with the federal government, so we need to start meeting people, government agencies, all the airport authorities. So, and also present to them our plan. They need to agree their plan. different from any other venue. The airport is not our own venue. Like we are part of the venue that is already functioning and is already working. Yeah. So we cannot disturb their operation, but at the same time, they need to be prepared for our operation.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, so basically that's what I do. I prepare the airport operations for all the tournament events in FIFA since 2019 that I have joined FIFA.
That's awesome. Well, I think we have to go a little bit into the details of, like, I guess in a sense, like I guess what are some visible you know, aspects that people actually kind of like next time, like they're in a host city or like a place where there's a tournament, then they take the airport, like what are some stuff that they can take, like, oh, you actually, like, you know, help organize that, or making sure that, you know, so people get a little bit essence of like what is it at essentially, like the visible elements that people like probably don't see unless you know about it, but they can then now, you know, start thinking about it.
Yes, for example, a men's World Cup, you know, it's a huge amount of people that are going to be going in. And now, for example, in Qatar is only one airport. Right. So this is going to be a totally different model of World Cups for FIFA. But at the same time, it's an advantage because it's very similar to the model of the Olympic Games that I have been part before. Yeah. Like the Rio Olympic Games was all in one city, and we always only had one major airport in the city. We had some hub airports to get there, but in the city, only one. Yep. So the airport, we are very fortunate, but the airport in Doha, the Hamad International Airport has been granted the best airport in the world. So I think so it's very good to be working with them. Yeah. But they are more transfer airport than an arrival airport. Right. So we kind of need to prepare the whole operation. They probably have several booths for immigration, but not all of them operate 24/7 for a month. You know, for example, security wise, now we have COVID. So what are going to be the protocols during COVID for the entrance? Do people need to do the COVID test there, or no, that is not required? Right. Specifically for Qatar, there is an application that they need to download so they are able to get into the country. Yep. Where in the flow should we put our helpers and our volunteers to help our guests and our clients to do this without disrupting the actual flow of the airport? So these are all little details. I always play with my team that the moment that nobody complains about the airport, that's when we did a good job. So the idea of our job is that we are invisible, that people only have a great experience and they feel part of it. It's the first point of arrival into a tournament. So they need to feel the idea and the essence of the tournament from right the beginning. So the goal is that everything goes well. There's no big disruptions. They can find easily, if they are spectators, their public transportation to go to their hotels. If they are their clients, that they find their transportation to go to their own hotels. Yep. And specifically for the Men's World Cup, we have major, very important teams. So we always try to create segregated flow so they are not disrupted by the fans, but at the same time, we create a photo opportunity so they can be filmed arriving in the country. So this can go to the media and people can start feeling, okay, the tournament has started. Yeah. So there's a little bit of everything together with logistics, that they have to have the trucks there to carry the baggage and to carry all the equipment. We normally work on a 24/7 operation. So and then we always start before the tournament. So arrivals and departures and transportation are two of the areas that start way before the tournament starts. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like we are way from the beginning until the end, doing our job. And if you don't complain about the airport, we did a good job. That's the goal. You know,
that makes total sense. And I think you talked about something really interesting as well in terms of obviously, you know, it's in a sense nice having that just like one place that you're, you know, focusing on, or airport that is like kind of like your main entry point. But the other thing I thought was interesting was how you talked about kind of like the essence of, okay, well, how do you now help, you know, without disturbing the flow of the airport, to prepare them for kind of like an arrival situation, right? Which is a very good point, because I mean, like, it's also like, I would assume, of course, like there are people visiting, you know, Qatar and this kind of, and Doha, but it's at the same time, like it's not, I guess in a sense, perhaps the audience that, like in general, that would be there perhaps. So that's also impacts, I guess, in a sense, like just, you know, I guess, of course, like the airport volunteers, but also like from FIFA, right? And kind of like visible there in that sense. And that I would assume is quite an interesting challenge that has to begin, you know, very early, you know, so you are ready for that. So that's
and the interesting point is sometimes is that people think that the start of the operation is the more complicated, but for us the departures is the more complicated time. Specifically in Qatar, because our this Football World Cup will be in November, December. So the final will be played on December 18, which is very close to the vacation and the holidays. So we have most of the guests departing 1 or 2 days after the final match. So it's a big influx of people going in the same direction to different points. And so for us, kind of like the departure operations is way more important than maybe the arrivals, because the arrivals, they are split little by little. Each client group arrives in a specific time, but all of that needs to be negotiated with the airport authorities, with the government authorities that relate to the airport, also with the transit authorities of the city, because it impacts the flow of the outside of the airport. So it's a lot of negotiation prior to the actual event.
Very interesting. You know, I think it's a very interesting element that most people don't really think about. Even if you're in sport, it's sort of like it makes sense when you kind of like talk about it, and you're sort of like obviously that you need to have those kind of, you know, partnership and negotiations and these, you know, kind of like things in place and quite early. But it's just like, again, as you were talking about, like you shouldn't be visible, be able to see it or notice it, you know, that is happening and that it's been there. And that's a very good, you know, benchmark in a sense for all of you to kind of like, you know, I guess evaluate yourself. But talking a little bit about like, you know, what are some of the other, you know, main projects that you are working on now with FIFA, and sort of like, you know, tournaments that are happening, because obviously there's always stuff happening. You know, obviously you mentioned like the Men's World Cup, but there's more happening. So let's talk a little bit about
and that was a very different change for me since I joined FIFA, because before I was always working for one project at a time. So I had a previous planning time for one project, either a rock festival or a film festival or even the Olympics. Since I arrived in FIFA, that has been my biggest challenge, but at the same time, I'm driven by challenge. So for me, it's a very nice experience and I like it, is that in a way, I supervise the airport operations for all the tournament and all the events that FIFA do. In 1 year, for example, we go to 8 to 10 events, small, not necessarily all of them are big, but we have the best awards, we have the FIFA Congress, we have at least two tournaments under 17 and under 20. This year we have the Men's World Cup. At the same time, we are already starting to work on the Women's World Cup in Australia and New Zealand, because it's going to happen 6 months after the World Cup is in July 2023. So it's a very dynamic area, you know, and then most of my counterparts are already in the city. So where the event is happening. So I work here in Zurich, and I often go to visit them there, but we work remotely with them. So the team of arrivals and departures is locally in Qatar. And now we're starting to build one in Australia and another one in New Zealand. And we work together because they have the local experience. I have previous events experience, and we build together the plan. You know, because every event is different. For example, the Men's World Cup is all going to be in only one airport and only one city. Then the New Zealand and Australia is going to be in 2 countries with several different airports. So we change completely the model from one to the other. So that is what excites me.
So let's obviously, you know, makes a lot of sense, you know, having these I guess things to work on, you know, and always kind of like looking for ways to, you know, go outside your comfort zone. But let's talk a little bit about those different kind of models that you would talk about. Obviously, you know, with the Men's World Cup, you have like, you know, one entry point, one airport, and then in the New Zealand, Australia, there's multiple. Like, how does that sort of like changes your approach or how the model that you're putting out?
I think the first stop is always reach government agencies, because different from the city management of a stadium, or example, which affects only the city. Normally, in every single country, the airport and the airspace is always defined by the federal government. So I think that is the first step to reach out. But for example, in Qatar is only one country that I have to deal with. In Australia and New Zealand is two different countries that have been through major lockdowns due to COVID. And we know that COVID is totally changeable. You know, we can create protocols as of today, but that in 6 months from now, when we are closer and we are going to be a tournament there, it can change. So I think the basic of 2023, the most important thing is that we create very strong relationships and trust. So communication flow, because if something changes, we need to create a new plan. So I always play with everybody that we always have to have for events, plan A, plan B, plan C, and plan D, because at one point you might need to use them, you know. But I think creating relationship, trust, and communication is the key. You know, in every single operation that you want to do it, if you want to do them right, you know, and also the trust is very important. They need to understand your numbers. They need to understand your needs. We need to listen and hear to their proposals, because they also might come with great proposals that out of the box that we have not thought about it. So it has to be an open relationship, you know. For sure. It makes a lot of sense. I wanted to go a little bit back. Like before your time at FIFA, and obviously you had the opportunity to work at the Tokyo 2020 Olympics as well, and I wanted to like just talk a little bit about your experience working, you know, such a major event during the pandemic, because obviously with Tokyo, like I'm referring to here, I guess what were some of the, you know, key challenges you faced at that point, because it was still kind of early in a sense, and people were, you know, a lot of questions, you know, and a lot of things came up. So the funny thing is that I work right after Rio 2016, I worked for the Tokyo organizing committee. And then in 2019, that's when I joined FIFA. But then I was made a lead for the football tournament from FIFA going to the Tokyo Olympics. So even though I participated to the operational planning of the Olympics and the arrivals and departures operation in Tokyo, I went to Tokyo as kind of like a client, you know, I was one of the client groups. But for me, it was very interesting because in the beginning, when I was appointed to be the lead of arrivals and departures and transportation to go to Tokyo, I was like, okay, I'm going back to a city that I lived. I'm going to go see all my friends again. I'm going to go back to the places that I love, and I had, and then also see all my friends that had worked in Olympic Games, you know, because you create a community there. And the strange thing is that they created bubbles like the ones that are creating now for Beijing. So it's because we are international federation and we have contacts with the athletes, we were completely involved in a bubble. So we could only go to our competition venues, myself at the airport or the hotel where we were located, our HQ, and the other city hotels. So I kind of like very little experienced the games because I did not see my counterparts or my friends from other games. I did not see other people from other teams or from other international federations because I was only there to watch the matches that we were playing, specific ones in Tokyo. And we kind of, we were testing every single day for 39 days. You know, even the arrival process, I think, I remember we were kind of one of the first arrivals into Tokyo. And obviously the whole government agencies were still adjusting. They had proposed probably a lot of things and they didn't know how it would be. And it took like a long time. If I remember, it was like almost 6 hours from the time that the plane landed until we left the airport. Because they were doing PCR tests. The PCR tests were not quick. We needed to wait for the results. After the results came, we needed to download an app, download the results into an app. So everything was, we were all going into the discovering what it will be like together with the government and together with the airport. So it was very challenging.
Yeah.
It was kind of like for me that I live now in Zurich, and we had already experienced COVID, and because Japan immediately closed the country, it was kind of like going back to Europe in the beginning of the pandemic. You know, so yeah, because Japan, for the first time with the games, they were opening the country for foreigners. And there was a lot of worry on with the Japanese population on what the effect could be on them, you know. So it was kind of it felt kind of like going back in time, you know, and we were feeling them experience things that we have experienced when the pandemic started in Europe, and every lockdown, we were all locked down. And here we were already going out. We were already going out without masks, but only masks inside some places. So it was a very different feeling. I was happy and glad that the games happened, because I think there is a lot of effort, money, and all the athletes, they train for so long. And specifically, if the Olympics was already postponed for a year. So if the Olympics did not happen, a lot of the athletes might not be able to compete on the next Olympics. So I was happy that it happened, but it was definitely a different tone Olympic Games, kind of like what I think Beijing is going to be from the previous Winter Olympics, you know.
100%. It's the feeling like are impacting just the overall, you know, feel and experience of it, right? And as you're talking about, kind of like these you know, bubbles, you know, that are being created, and just you can't burst that bubble, you know. You have to stick in that bubble.
But also the feeling of having to test every day. I think we have been tested. Obviously you have to do the PCR before you travel, that's normal, but I have never been, that was my first tournament. Now it's normal. Now whenever we go to a tournament, we have a testing schedule, a testing regimen, which is normally every 3 days. But in Tokyo, because it was the first one, we were testing each other every single day. So it's kind of like they were testing a size of a city per day, you know, because we were one of the people that were had to be tested every single day. So it's a lot of effort and a lot of also medical experience that had to be put in place. So it's kind of like a sporting event that for one, out of the blue, they had to create all this medical entourage and solutions that were never thought at this scale, you know, in an event before.
No, and that's kind of like the interesting thing too, because essentially the first major event happening during the pandemic, you know, which was sort of like you had to do it right, and you just have to be a little bit extra careful. And like it was new for everyone, right? Like people that were doing it, you know, the people that attended it, the people that, you know, athletes, like everyone like just came in almost like with a question mark, right? How is this gonna be? And then just trying to do the best out of it. But I wanted to like looking back, you know, on like, you know, obviously your experience with major events before the pandemic, and obviously the time during, you know, I wouldn't say it's over yet, because it's not.
No, it's not. You know? It's not. So, we don't know when might happen. You know, we don't know.
I mean, like, you know, we gotta stay on the bright side. It's gonna happen at some point.
Exactly.
But I want to, I mean, like we talked a lot about the challenges, but I wanted to talk and focus a little bit on like, what do you see were some, like, I guess, the positive outcomes that came like out of this situation that the sport event industry learned and took from it, of like, okay, of course it's a challenge, but like, what are some of the things I guess you experienced and learned that you like sit and think, you know, that was actually a really smart or good initiative that might continue, you know, after the pandemic, you know, for the future?
I think, first of all, communication with the teams improved a lot, because we had to create very quick and fast communications in case somebody tested positive, and what would be what they needed to do right after they were advised that they, so not necessarily only a communication through email, but a lot of new apps were created in a very fast way. A lot of communication in between entities also was created, from the organizing committee to communicate with the other stakeholders. So I think that is a plus. Like I said before, I think not necessarily the medical departments had such an impact in any of the sport organizations before, the sports events before.
Yep.
But I think the care that needed to be put in place and the solutions that needed to be put in place for the pandemic by the medical departments, this is definitely a plus, because I believe that the athletes are more taken care of, the staff is more taken care of, there's more awareness of the health, you know, especially throughout an event that lasts 39, 40 days. There's a lot of things that happen, and a lot of people get tired, a lot of people get sick, and not necessarily all these arrangements, you know, medical arrangements were put in place before. They happened, they were there, but not at this scale. So I think all these improvements definitely will help the whole industry to be better prepared and to be healthier, you know, throughout the tournament or throughout an event. So I think that is definitely the plus.
And you're bringing up a really good point here, I think, which is sort of like, I guess, been like it's been like I guess, in a sense, a major question mark in like major events, like in general, especially like during the Olympics, right? Where whether that's winter or summer, it doesn't really matter. But, you know, you sort of like, obviously you're talking about your bubbles, right? Of like the, we're going to say athlete hotels and all this stuff. And then, you know, suddenly somebody gets sick and you literally have like an entire hotel, you know, that are sick, right? And so obviously this health restrictions and these kind of like, you know, elements to it, you know, will positively, in a sense, impact this situation to avoid, okay, if somebody gets sick, you know, like you have a larger team and people around you to like handle that, maybe in a faster and more reliable way.
Yeah, but another thing that I think totally changed every single industry, not only the event industry, was what we're doing right now, the Zooms, you know, the Zooms and the Teams and the chats and the Google Meets. So for example, myself, prior to the pandemic, I had a programmed time to go visit Qatar just to have face-to-face meetings, you know, even with the government agencies and the airport entities. This has completely changed. Now I go to Qatar specifically for a tournament or for a test event, but all the other meetings, I'm able to participate on them by video, you know. I have meetings with New Zealand with this time zone, and maybe I would not be able to have them because it's so far away. And now there's still some COVID restrictions in some states that I'm fully able to do it from my house or from my office. You know, I think so this technology was not put in place before. I think we were getting there, we were starting to use it, but it became essential and totally transform our industry, you know, and in a way save some costs. Let's put this way, like the medical costs that were low, they increased, and then the communication costs and the travel costs were high and they were decreased. So it kind of like balanced out.
You
balance. But I believe, but I believe that the communication, for meetings or for quick decision-making processes, it improved a lot. It improved a lot, definitely.
I agree 100% in how that impacted the industry, because I mean, like, I think also from a, you know, startup perspective, right, where you're kind of like limited resources and you don't necessarily have the budget, right, and kind of like pre-pandemic, you were kind of like, people were almost expecting you to kind of like come visit them, you know, for like that first meeting or what it is, right, and we're like, okay, we kind of have to do it, you know, and then it's kind of like an ROI situation, right? Like, is it worth going down there, you know, because it's like having a meeting in Spain. Okay, I'm gonna travel from Norway to Spain. Okay, so hotel, like travel, like all this, like it's costly for a startup.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And but for an entity as well. So if you imagine, I'm one department from several other departments from FIFA. There is organizing. There is a part of a big organization.
Oh yeah.
So it changed completely every single aspect of it. Obviously, for example, when we have an area that is how do you say, pitch management. They need to go and see the pitch, so they can do some they can do some meetings, but they obviously need to continue to travel to see the pitch and analyze the pitch. But on a big, large scale, a lot of the areas communicated better and faster and more efficient now after the pandemic. And I don't know if the pandemic did not happen, if we would have jumped to this so fast.
Probably not, you know, and that's sort of like the whole thing around it too, where, you know, it's like crisis leads to innovation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then also the home office. I think in a lot of ways, we were all needed to be together. I still believe, and I love having the face-to-face encounters with people. But for example, in FIFA now we have, you need to work 3 times during the week at the office. If you are in Zurich, if you are in a tournament event, obviously not. But then you have the flexibility to do 2 days at home. And you can choose which days. So for example, I myself, that I have meetings with Australia and New Zealand at 7 a.m., those days I stay at home, because for me it's more convenient to wake up at my house and have the meeting at 7. And then I can have the whole day here. And the days that I don't have, I go to the office. So, you know, I think this is another. So see, we found a lot of things that came back in a good way with the pandemic.
Good things. There's plenty of good things. And I mean, like, yeah, I think that brings up a really valid point too, in terms of organizations' flexibility, right? And I think it's just also obviously should probably have been there already, but it's like, again, it's smart, it's easy to be, you know, afterwise, you know, kind of like the saying. And yeah, just I guess providing also for, I would say, like in a sense, for the upcoming generation, right, which is much more you know, like needing of like, okay, we can do our stuff, you know, from home, and I think a lot of people also learn that that's fine, and you can like get good results from having that balance.
You're still productive. You're still productive, and you can deliver a lot, even being from your home, if that is your preferred way of working, you know.
Right. And I think that's the key thing here, is that having that flexibility, it actually could like elevate the productivity and deliverables for some people that actually really, you know, might work better at home, or like to have like that sort of, you know, life that you have that flexibility. And I think that's a very smart approach to it, and you kind of like need to go more and more in that direction. And that's sort of like,
and I think also the young generation is more technology savvy than for example myself. So I believe that those changes are going to continue. You know, who knows, maybe in the metaverse that we are going, that I still don't understand a lot what it is, but I think maybe we are going to have different experience even in the event, you know, time, you know, I don't know. I still think that there nothing substitutes a tournament live with audience, you know, like for example, between Japan, Tokyo 2020 and now Beijing 2022, there is a difference of audience. Like Japan was totally made with no audience, and that was very strange to be watching a match with nobody there, you know. So even for the athletes, you know, I think for the players is a very different feeling. But maybe with the new innovations that are coming, there might be different things or experience that we might create for the audience and for the players and for the people that work in the industry, you know?
Right. No, 100%. I mean, like technology is always rapidly changing, and it's always fun to see kind of like how that is impacting, you know, the industry and the things coming up. I wanted to, when we're sort of like in the essence here of wrapping up a little bit, I wanted to go like more on, of course, like we've been, you know, diving into like some topics, some knowledge, and some good insights, you know, of what you're doing and some challenges that you've been facing. But I wanted to go a little bit more into like, I guess in a sense, the tips side of the scale, where obviously, you know, you talked a lot about, you know, working across the globe. You've been practically everywhere at this point. And I guess what are some of the valuable tips that you would give to students, you know, that are looking to go abroad, and I guess like in this stage and time to either for work or for school? What are some things that they should, you know, keep in mind?
I think the first thing for me, for example, is communication. So I think if you have into as a goal that you would like to have an international career, speaking several languages is definitely a plus, you know. So English is a no-brainer, obviously, but for example, now Arabic is a language that is growing a lot because there's a lot of events in Arabic countries. Chinese, you know, Japanese were languages that I have never thought that I would have contact with. And at the end, knowing a little bit of the language, even when I was there, made a lot of change, you know, because not necessarily everybody in a new country speaks your language, you know, and communication is kind of key for you to build relationships and build, deliver what you need to deliver. So I think that from my perspective, if you're a student and you want to grow your career internationally, I would focus on that. But at the same time, I think experience is key. So I always volunteer. So I started, actually, my first event was in a film festival in Miami, and I entered the film festival as a volunteer, you know, right. And then and I started from there. So I think everybody has a potential, not necessarily, you know, the industry that you're going, right. But going as a volunteer, you start to experience it in a way, and you start identifying, oh, I think I might like this area more than that. You know, right. I think that, and then you also start building relationship. You start knowing people from the industry, and they might remember you for the next time. And you open yourself to possibilities. Sometimes, like I have that happened with me. You know, I have several people that work with me, and then after an event, we keep contact through LinkedIn. And then if by any chance I have to do an event there, that's the first person that I'm going to contact. Right. You know, right. So I think. A lot of the people nowadays that they are, this generation, I believe, is the first generation that has a lot of knowledge and a lot of specific study on events management and sport events management, other than mine. You know, we became sport events people, but there was not a big a university on my time right. to do that, even if I wanted. Yeah. So I think we grew with the business, but I think from the people now, they have a lot of knowledge, right. a lot of cases, but they sometimes lack a little bit of the experience of it. Oh, yeah. So I think if you are building your career, it's very important that you also have the experience and the live touches of seeing it happen, seeing the wrongs and the goods. You know, thinking out of the box in the minute, because that's what an event brings to you. You know, you have to find right. solutions at the spot, and building relationships, because network is everything for this business. You know,
100%. I mean, like you practically touch upon like technically my next question too, but I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into it. But definitely, you know, it's like the language. You know, going abroad is a huge thing. And volunteering, you know, as you were talking about too, is like getting your foot out the door. And I think sometimes, you know, especially in today's situation or like with where the industry is going, it's like people might have the wrong expectations of like what is realistically going in. So it's always good to kind of like get a step back and understand, okay, well, how do I actually start? You know, what is the approach here? And I wanted to like just go a little bit more into like, you know, tips you have for any sports student or professional looking for a career in the sport industry in general. And just like, obviously you talk about volunteering, you talk about networking, but if there's anything else, something else you want to like add
for
on?
For example, the FIFA is my first experience specifically in one sport. You know, right. I have worked with the Olympics and in Tokyo. I have also work with the Lima Pan American Games, and then I work so it was always a lot of different sports. So this right. is my first time working with only one sport, and I am not a pro in football. I can admit right. that. So for example, one of the first things that I did as soon as I got into football, I joined the Women in Football, which is an association, a non-for-profit organization right. That connects women that work in the football industry in every single level, from the athlete to the referee, to the sports presenter, to somebody from a lawyer that represents athletes. So I think trying to find organizations that connect to where you want to go, because there are several non-for-profit organizations. Most of them you can join without even paying a fee. Right. And by then you start connecting and understanding more your business, you know, finding podcasts, finding groups that you can follow, that you will explain a little bit more what is your expectations, what is the business. I think always knowledge is never enough, you know, so the more you understand and you know more from each, the industry that you want to navigate to is the best. You know, I always say that Tokyo for me was a very challenging, the Tokyo Olympic Games was very challenging, not only for COVID, but it was my first tournament in FIFA. Right. And even though I have done several different events for several different organizations, doing an event is where doing a tournament is where you actually understand the full end-to-end from every single client group, you know? So it was a very good learning curve for me. And I totally believe that now I have better experience with a tournament than I had before. So you continue to grow even though you are in the same company. So maybe in FIFA, for example, we have this experience. People that are, for example, in the legal department or on an accounting department, they can volunteer to go to another position for an event, you know? Nice. So it's kind of like a way of you building connections and understanding a little bit more of your business. So I think that is another tip that I encourage, is try to find organizations that work or represent where you want to go, and also try to connect with people. You know, I receive a lot of connections, invites from LinkedIn. You know, I normally don't accept somebody that just invite me, but if somebody sends me an invite explaining to me why they want to connect and, you know, what is their goal, I always try to reach out and, you know, and try to connect, because I think it's important that we help each other. You know, we are one industry, so it's very important. Well, the connections.
I think it's a perfect way to wrap this podcast up with. You know, it's a lot of good, you know, insights and tips that you have shared with us, Valeria.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, like, I just wanted to thank you so much, you know, for taking the time.
It's my pleasure.
I know you're in a busy schedule, a lot of things coming up, so it's always good. And I do believe it's a lot of people here sitting, and I think they learned something new today, you know, something interesting.
I hope so.
Oh, by far. I mean, like, I was sitting here and just like soaking everything in. So I feel like, you know, for me as well, like, I'm learning something new every time I'm having like this podcast with somebody, because, you know, it's always good getting those insights. So I'm as grateful as all the people that are listening, you know, getting some insights. So the learning never stops. You know, you're always trying to get some good insights and knowledge to help you on your journey. And we do have like kind of like a tradition here in the Sporting Global podcast that we have to do. So I have to learn you a little bit Norwegian, actually.
You have to learn what?
I have to learn you a little bit of Norwegian. I have to teach you
Norwegian. You're going to teach me Norwegian, okay?
Yeah, no, like we have this tradition, you know, that with every video we do, we always finish with "Vi snakkes," which means "see you later" in Norwegian. So that's what you have to say.
Vi snakkes.
There you go. You know.
Okay.
Good job.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Valeria. We'll talk very soon.